that solves everything. Like the Constitution is some messianic document that's rooted in a spiritual awakening. And it's nothing but a document that was prepared by a bunch of syphilis carrying slaveholders, uh, indigenous Indian people killers. That's all it was. That's all the people that wrote it. So we want to break it down and talk about the contradictions within it. And so that's what we're going to do today. And we're glad that you're here, of course. We give honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. In the Constitution, keep this in mind, and you should read it. If you haven't read it, don't argue. Shut up and read it. But you should read it. And if you read the whole thing, it refers to indigenous people as savage Indians. That's how they're documented in the U.S. Constitution. African people are three-fifths of a human being. The indigenous people are savage. They didn't even get that, but not that that's like racing to the bottom to debate about who's being more disrespected. We're all being disrespected. And if you are of European descent, and you believe these lies they've been cramming down your throat all your life, that the Constitution represents a document for freedom and democracy, then you're being disrespected. So we're all being disrespected. So we give honor to the indigenous people because, like us, those that are conscious within their community understand that July 4th is a contradiction, and that they, if they have any dignity and self respect, should not stand up and respect that nonsense. And so we honor those of them that recognize that, and those of them that don't recognize that, we wish them well. And we honor our African ancestors. Many of us recognize, it's easy for us. Like if you don't get it, if you're African and you don't get the contradiction of July 4th, then you're just not paying attention, or you don't want to get it because you're a grifter, and you know that if you stand up and speak the master's language, there might be a payday for you in it. And a lot of people fall in that category. But if you are someone that's paying attention and you have a consciousness, and you know the difference between right and wrong, then it's a little easier for us because we have Juneteenth just 2.5 weeks before July 4th. And what happens every Juneteenth, especially since 2020, when Juneteenth, I think it was 2020 or 2021, I believe, where it became a federal holiday. And that was, again, another example of power conceding nothing without a demand, because the only reason why that happened, and I don't give a damn whether Juneteenth's a federal holiday or not, but I'm just saying the only reason why that happened is because of the mass protests from the killing of George Floyd. Mass protests all around the world, not even just this backward ass country where it was happening. And that's, whenever we do that, there's concessions, which should tell us something, right? We play by the rule, we play by the master's rules, we get nothing. When we challenge the master's empire, we get concessions. If we fight the master to the finish, we'll get freedom. But at any rate, that's how Juneteenth became a federal holiday. And so I've been celebrating Juneteenth since I was a little child. But my point is that what we've seen since 2020, 2021 is that every year when Juneteenth comes around, you see all these crackers and graham crackers and all the scum of humanity go out of their way to vomit on Juneteenth. I mean, they do it every year. You can go back to June 19th last month and you can see it everywhere. So since that happens, if you're a conscious African, just 2.5 weeks later, why the hell would you want to respect their institution when they just demonstrated 2.5 weeks ago that they have absolutely no respect for your institution? So why would you respect theirs? We're not talking about 50 years or 300 years. We're talking about 2.5 weeks for you to see the contradiction. So if you don't see it again, it's because you don't want to see it, or either because you're a grifter, you're a sellout, and you see a payday behind acting like July 4th is representative of anything other than what it actually is represented. Colonialism, theft, murder, and the domination of the European Judeo-Christian capitalist empire. That's all July 4th is. Nothing else. That's all it is. So we're glad that you're joining us. And we're going to just go get started and just talk about who we are, like I always do. Our Ancestors' Voices. It's a program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party. We are based in Africa. We're fighting. We're fighting for to build Pan-Africanism, which is one unified socialist Africa. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's handbook, displayed on this page. The cover is that's where the strategy to achieve Pan-Africanism, and we need every African. We are not, we do not have the answers. We do not have all the solutions. We do not have the people. We need you. Don't believe that lie. There is no organization out here that doesn't need you. So our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and my biological, ideological daughter, Dr. Shakura Umi. So to get us started on this topic, 250 years of hypocrisy, breaking down the U.S. Constitution, I'll turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Let's jump right in. I couldn't have said it better myself, Baba Jamu. I love those examples you just gave. So let's jump right in. So we welcome you today, and we are here to continue our conversation from last weekend, where we highlight some of the inconsistencies or what you might call the contradictions. All right. So the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, was voted on and ratified by European settlers who came to the United States and murdered thousands of indigenous people. They violated them sexually, they disrespected them, they lied to them, they used their bodies for research and medical advances and did not give the indigenous people credit for the outcomes that took place and were products of said research. They completely tormented them and just completely dehumanized them. And so, like, just understanding where that basis is coming from for us to then kind of understand how it's kind of coming full circle, right? In terms of what that looks like. These same European settlers not only murdered all of these indigenous people, but they also owned Africans as property, right? So the people who were called the forefathers, if you will, we can mention George Washington, we can mention Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, people like that. Those are the folks that we are centering when we're talking about how this Constitution came to be, while still also thinking of those contradictions. And I want you to remember us saying that, European settlers not only murdered and violated and harmed indigenous people, but they did the same thing while also owning African people, right? So even though the Constitution was signed on July 4th, 1776, the document actually had amendments to it, and the amendments were then added up to at least into the 1790s. Okay, so it was signed in 1776, but there were still amendments that were being added and changing, therefore, the document's status, also, the direction of the document and how people came to understand the document, even up into the 1790s, right? Through today's seminar, we will demonstrate how, even though there is uh, a bridge, if you will, or a cursory, right, in terms of how we can reveal that the utter and complete contradictions within this document are present and accounted for. And I think that today's seminar is actually going to be not only a very useful and insight to many of us, but for those of us who have never really stopped to think about how these contradictions have came to be. Maybe you haven't necessarily read the document like Baba Jamu said, or maybe you just haven't really taken the time to really think through some of this stuff. Remember that we're always encouraging anyone who is fighting for justice, whether you are in an organization working for justice or not, everybody at a basic level should be able to understand what it means to think critically, especially because we live in a society where it's pretty much illegal for you to think for yourself. You are outcasted, you are gaslit, you are, considered a bad person. And like, there's all these different ways that people will make you feel silly or unintelligent because you are thinking for yourself, because you're not going with the traditional stream, because you're pushing against the system. Um, and so I think we should just kind of take in, what the Constitution is supposed to represent and then be critical about that in terms of how we are already positioning everything else. And as we've said to you before, and we'll say again, Anything that is based on the US, you have to assume that it was stolen. It was developed based on lies and mistrust, harm, murder, sexual assault, like any one of those things. We can just assume at this point, theft of land, theft of people, in some cases, like we can just assume at this point that that's what that was. So creating the Constitution would be no different. And I also just want to give a quick shout out not only to indigenous people, to enslaved Africans, as well as our Asian comrades who helped to build the railroads. Anybody who was escaping colonization at that time. So our comrades from India, give a shout out to our comrades in Ireland who are still fighting the British for their control of land and power and resources. And so just saying all of this to say, like, the document that we're about to talk about today is clearly a representation of how the U.S. has completely harmed and killed millions of people around the world who just happen to be of African and maybe indigenous, or in this case, even other descents, right? And so, even though these folks literally incorporated blood, sweat, and tears to build this country, I mentioned to you all several seminars ago that one of my favorite rooms in the Civil Rights Lorraine Motel Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, where Dr. King was assassinated, the very first room you walk in, after that, they don't talk about it as much, but the very first room that you walk in, after you have a quick, like, pre documentary visual, they have you all watch the same video. And then the screen that you were watching the video opens up, and you can get out of your seat and walk into this room and start your museum experience. And the first room you walk in, you hear drums playing, and there's all of these informational infographics and things you can touch, and artifacts from different parts of Africa that were stolen and whatnot. And you get to see the idea of just how we were being enslaved, how we were abducted, what that looks like, how we were captured, right? And to the right, you can see like a statue of our ancestors walking with the chains and the shackles on, right? And so I'm just saying, like, that's my favorite room on purpose because there's one small little imprint. It's very tiny, and if you're not careful, you'll miss it. But it literally says, like, the United States was built off of the back of enslaved Africans. And that is more than a true statement. And as I said before in the seminar several weeks ago, where I talked about the medical experimentation, and I did mention indigenous people today as well as back then, but I also want to give homage to our African ancestors who are being violated from experimentation standpoints. So clearly, we have medicine, we have treatment, we have options, we have specialties that exist now because of experimentations on African people. And I am not going to stop saying that. I'm going to keep saying that. Not to mention the structural development of the United States, the economic development of the United States. We've already talked about that. How the transatlantic slave trade was very profitable, how insurance companies were extremely profitable because Africans were considered property. Of course. So you would take out an insurance policy on your enslaved property. Of course you would. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, just being critical of what this document represents, what you see on the image. And the image is perfect, by the way. Hopefully you are not driving and you can't see the image right now, but this image is the Constitution on wrapped up as a toilet paper roll. It's on the little carton and everything, because at the end of the day, what does this document really represent? Especially if conditions still have not changed. Over 500 years later, conditions still have not changed. People are still not safe, and they're still not able to, excuse me, live a quality of life that they deserve to live. Next slide, please. So these are things that we have to think about, you all. And again, like, why are you celebrating or promoting something like that if in fact that is what that represents? And it's still like very minute, but it's still present and still very much necessary. So I do recall that I was out shopping somewhere. I think I was at a thrift store last week sometime, and it was probably like Thursday or Wednesday. And I get to the cashier and asked them how they were doing. They asked me how I was doing. And then they said, what are your plans for the fourth? Not do you celebrate? Like, because it's crazy to me that you would even assume, but people do, right? That's crazy to me. I would never assume that. I would never assume that. So they said that to me, and then I said, well, I don't celebrate that holiday. Oh, neither do I. But you just asked me what my plans were. And I think you're asking me what my plans are because you kind of wanted me to ask you also. Like, what are your plans? Like, that's kind of like a like basic human 101, like psychology. Like, I feel like you really want, so you're prompting, you know what I mean? And so I just thought to myself, you do celebrate it. Because why would you even ask that? And why would you even say the name of the holiday? Like, we don't even have to acknowledge it. We don't even have to respect it. We could say the 4th of July, or we could say, do you celebrate this so called holiday? Like, there's so many different ways to say that, but the propaganda is so real. So then when I took it in a different direction and I said, yeah, I don't celebrate that. Oh, neither do I. But you do, though, because you just asked me what I was doing. And then I was like, oh, okay. And the conversation was kind of stale for a minute, but it's like that's what that looks like, you all. Like being willing to be uncomfortable. Like you have got to keep pushing that. You have got to keep pushing that because for so long, too many people have remained silent. And because of that, their discomfort wasn't, I guess, able to be sacrificed. And look at what it's got us. So I would argue it's going to take a lot more of us that are going to have to be uncomfortable, risk being uncomfortable. We're going to have to mention being uncomfortable. We're going to have to push back when people are doing traditional normative things, and we need to resist that. You know what I mean? I spent some time this weekend with my dad and my family, and people were saying, happy so and so, happy so and so. And we didn't say anything back because we're not going to perpetuate the propaganda, you all. We're not going to perpetuate it. We're not going to enforce it. Some of my friends knew that I was out of town and they asked me, what are you doing today? And I texted back, I'm with family. This day is not any other day. It is a regular day. Like you have to keep pushing that because what I've noticed is then other people will start to question why their normative behaviors are considered normative if they too, in fact, see a contradiction with it. And it's unfortunate that you have to be the person to take that on. But if not you, then who? If not you, then who? Like that's the question. It was always going to be a group of us who were going to be different from the average folks. And because of that, now the behavior is starting to shift in a whole new direction. So we have to kind of think about that. What if our ancestors had chosen not to do the things that they were known for? What if Rosa Parks didn't get on the bus that day? What if Huey P. Newton said, "Yeah, I don't believe that we should start this organization." Like, what if they decided not to do these things, you all? What if W.B. Du Bois, what if Shirley Graham Du Bois didn't go to West Africa? What if Shirley Graham Du Bois did not decide to start this television and radio program that is still happening today? What if Marcus Garvey did not create the Universal Improvement, excuse me, the UNIA, the Universal, oh God, how come I can't remember it now? Universal Negro Improvement Association. I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Baba Jama. But what if he decided not to do that? What if he had decided, I don't think we need a flag to represent us as a people? What if he had decided not to do that? What if Amy Jocks had decided not to write his first book? Like, what if any of these things had not happened? We would probably still be here, but our ideologies would be very different. They would be very different. And we owe them everything because of that. We owe them everything because of that. So I just think that it's important for us to push what discomfort looks like, you all. Remember, when you're discomfortable, you grow. When you are not experiencing comfort, that's when you grow. Because if you're already comfortable, then that means nothing is changing. The static norm is staying the same. But when you're uncomfortable, that's when you can start to open up the development of new ideas, possibilities, institutions, beliefs, values, whatever is supposed to be there, it's going to come. So just encouraging us to think through that a little bit more, and also kind of highlighting what some of these truths are laying out in today's seminar. So understanding that the purpose of the United States Constitution was to make sure that individual liberties, end quote, were protected since the farmers were people escaping religious persecution in Europe. I'll say that again. The purpose of the US Constitution was to make sure that individual liberties, end quote, were protected. Individual liberties were protected since farmers were people escaping religious persecution in Europe. So these farmers came here and they needed their individual liberties to be protected because they had come from Europe, right? As a result, some of the intentions behind the document created some merit, right? They held merit with that, right? Unfortunately, though, even those efforts are clouded in dishonesty, especially around how they are supposed to be implemented, right? And just highlighting the photo here, you see a collection of, we have people who have been notorious for sexually assaulting people in this photo. We have terrorists here. We have people who continuously have been dishonest and are known as liars. We have people who have violated children and their rights as pedophiles. We have the worst scum on the earth that is disguised as freedom fighters, the worst of the worst of the worst. And so, like, this is what that looks like. And again, like, if you're not careful, the propaganda will confuse you and make you think that, you should be celebrating these people. It'll make you think that you should be honoring them. It'll make you think that you should never be speaking about them as being a terrorist or, or a pedophile. But the actuality of it is, if it's the truth, it's the truth. And that's part of the issue. That's part of the reason we're in this situation now, is because we have not been telling the truth with ourselves, with our people, and with our path in terms of freedom. And we got to be honest. We can't be liberal, right? We have to be honest. We can't be liberal. I can't remember her name right now because her name really doesn't matter. But she was one of the non-male, well-known markers of the women's suffrage movement. Not Elizabeth Cady Stanton, not Lucretia Moss. It was some other European woman. And I was just introduced to her name just a couple of days ago. But my point is, she was actually known for her work as a suffragette, but in actuality, she made it clear, because she also was one of the first women to hold a politician position, either in Congress or something like that, in the United States. And people knew her because she was a suffragette and because she was on Congress. And one of the bills she wanted to pass was, she said that, all African men should be murdered because they are harming white women, they are harming children, and they need to be stopped. And it's crazy to me that we don't know her for that. What we know her for is her ability to change women's rights, which was also exclusive just for European cis women. So don't get me started on that. But I'm just saying, like, this is the world we live in, you all, where the people on this image are celebrated, they are applauded, they are instituted, they are embraced, they are enforced. We buy their paraphernalia, we buy their t-shirts, we put their names on our schools where we send our children. Okay, so like, the kind of backwardsness that we're looking at here, like, you have really got to think through that. You should ask yourself, if Thomas Jefferson owned enslaved Africans, why are there schools named after him, and why are we celebrating him? If he violated his enslaved Africans and then didn't even raise the children that were the products of him violating them, why are we celebrating him? And he's one example. I'm sure they all own slaves. He's just one example. So we got to think through that a little bit. And I would argue the European woman I just mentioned is no different from that. We have to, like, learn how to reveal the truths even when they're not there. It was Booker T. Washington who said we need to unlift the veil of ignorance. And I could not agree more with that, brother. We have got work to do, you all. So this is what that looks like. And I'll pass it back over to Baba Jamu, just before reminding you, your political education is your responsibility, you all. It's okay for you to get access to media and things like that, but don't be afraid to pick up some books, because that's where the real truth lies. Ashe.
Ashe, obrigada, Santisana, Medasi. Thank you. I just wanted to point out just a couple of quick things. So, in this slide, it's actually talking about the framers, Shakur, meaning the people who drafted the Constitution, not farmers. You had a concept right, though, because you named all the people, or at least some of them, that we're talking about: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, Patrick Henry. Those are some of the many people in this picture. But you're also correct in that a large, I forgot the exact percentage, we can look it up, but a large number of them, including all the men I just named, did enslave African people, did rape African women, did have children engaging in violent rape against African women. And, this is, they didn't care about the age of the African women. They raped children. So pedophilia is as much a part of America as apple pie. Pedophilia is, this country was founded in its present form on pedophilia. So you should, if you know the history, it shouldn't be a surprise to you that these wicked pedophiles now are being unpunished and people are defending them. These scum have always done that. That's what this country is based on. I don't know why I don't know why anybody would be surprised by that. You're not paying attention. So let's get into it. Let's talk about these amendments to the Constitution. And first, it should be pointed out, you all, that, like, I know most people don't read it, and you don't read it because you know it's bullshit, but you should read it because that's the only way you can. I read all kind of stuff I don't agree with all the time because I want to be able to know what I'm talking about. right? And if you don't study it, you can't know it. You can't just say, "Well, I don't agree with it, but I haven't looked at it." You sound like a fool if you do that. So that's the reason why I study it, because I can say, "Yeah, I've studied this, and on this page it said this, and that's wrong for these reasons." So it has credibility, and so that's what we want, because that's how we begin to sway the consciousness by knowing what we're talking about. I know ignorance is a flex in this backward society today, but we have to change that. So it's important to note that the first pages of the Constitution are actually guidelines that demonstrate how the electoral process in this country is supposed to be facilitated. So there are a number of pages in the beginning of the Constitution that are not, an amendment is just that. An amendment is an addition, but the actual Constitution was really, a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about, where they're talking about how the national government would be set up, how the states would have so many senators, how they would have so many House of Representatives representing them, how all of that would happen, the electoral college to elect the president, all of these things. Not the electoral that came a little later, but the process of electing the president, all of that is what the Constitution opens up with. And then after that is all laid out, then the amendments or the additions are discussed. And so the First Amendment, everybody knows, like, oh, First Amendment is free speech. But what is never talked about is the First Amendment, what it actually says is it prevents the establishment of a religious state, and it supposedly permits freedom of assembly. And this requires a critical understanding, you all, because we don't have freedom of assembly. There are a number of protests all the time that are disrupted by state-sanctioned terrorists like police. So for no reason other than people don't want the protests to happen. And the U.S. has never believed in freedom of assembly. I remember years ago, I was with the APRP comrades in Ghana, in Accra, Ghana, and there was a protest planned at the U.S. Embassy in central Accra in Ghana. And the protest was, I can't remember what the protest was for, but there were a number of people there, hundreds of people that were there. And the organizers had gotten a permit to have the protest there. Again, this is in Ghana. This is Africa. This is our land. And the U.S. has a embassy there because the U.S. is a colonial exploiting power, and they control the majority of the control for world politics and economics comes out of Washington D.C. So they're there with their damn embassy, and what happened is that the Ghanaian police came and they were like, the protest can't happen. And sitting behind them were the U.S. Marines who were there stationed to, supposedly defend the U.S. embassy. And even though there was a permit, what they were saying is that no, the U.S. doesn't want this protest to happen. So these people don't believe in freedom of assembly. They don't believe in what they put in the First Amendment. But I think that one thing the crackers that drafted the document have to be given a minimal amount of credit for is because of the exploitation and persecution they experienced in Europe. And Europe has a strong history of persecution, especially around religion. No question about that. That's why there's no question that Jews were definitely persecuted in Europe. No question about that. But what they had was an effort to try to prevent that from happening in this colonial society that they built here. But you can't build freedom on oppression. And this society has always been built on oppression. So that's understanding. And that's why you have all these contradictions with the First Amendment, right? So, for example, I work for a labor union, and the labor union work for represents people that work in the prisons here in California. Because prisons are like cities. So they have IT people, they have medical staff, nurses, medical assistants, they have custodians, they have people who cook the food, they have records people, clerical folks, they have all these folks that are IT folks. All these folks are represented by the union I work for. And oftentimes, what happens is like they don't allow you to take cell phones into the prisons. They don't allow you to take pictures in the prisons. They don't allow you to take pictures of the prison facility. And the thing that's always bit of interest to me is that how can they say that? How can they do that? Like these prisons are public institutions. They're taxpayer funded. They're public prisons. They're not private prisons. They're public prisons. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, CDCR, that's a state agency that's funded by tax dollars. So who has the right to say, well, you as a public citizen, a taxpayer, you can't take a picture of this facility? I'm just putting that out there, food for thought, right? You should not be, they should not be allowed to say that if it's a public institution. And if they're saying, well, we do it for safety, well, I mean, you could say that about anything. I could walk out my house and you could be on the sidewalk and take a picture of me, and I could say I don't feel safe, so you can't do that. But the way their laws are written, you can do that because you have no right for an expectation of privacy in public, but it doesn't extend to the institutions of repression that they have. And we go along every day and we don't even question that. Nobody I work with ever questions that the way I just did. And when I bring it up, people just look at me like, oh, like that, So contradiction, hypocrisy. You don't have any freedom of speech in this society. You can say whatever the hell you want, but the minute that people start listening to you, you'll find out how little freedom of speech that you have in this society. And if you don't believe that, ask Malcolm X, ask Fred Hampton, ask Dr. Martin Luther King, ask all of these people what kind of free speech they had. These people didn't, Martin Luther King didn't commit any crimes. Clearly, the government had a role in his assassination. Clearly, this government had a role in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. They facilitated that in the Congo when he was elected as the Congo's first democratically elected prime minister. So don't tell me this bullshit that this country's about democracy and freedom. Patrice Lumumba committed no crimes as prime minister of the Congo, but yet they assassinated him because he was not acting in a way that represented their political and economic interests. So that's what it has to do with. So the First Amendment is trash. That's what I'm saying. The Second Amendment speaks to a well-regulated militia, which was really specifically designed to represent the state militias in the southern U.S. who were white men were required to be a part of because of the constant fear of slave rebellion. And those crackers had good reason to fear slave rebellions. They were happening consistently. C.L.R. James' book, I talk about the history of Pan-African slave revolts. Over 300 slave revolts happened in the Western Hemisphere within a century. This was the case. We were tearing up these slave plantations. So in the southern U.S., you have to belong to a militia if you were a white man. And the Second Amendment, which was originally drafted by James Madison and then was followed up on by other crackers, was designed to ensure that the states could maintain their ability to arm themselves so that they can engage in these slave patrols and these state militias to battle our people that were fighting to be free. That's a large reason why they say, well, it was created to stop tyranny. Shut the hell up. What tyranny? You haven't done a damn thing to stop that. All you do is support tyranny against us. You don't have any credibility. You're a goddamn liar if you want us to believe that. We don't believe anything you say. If you said the sky was blue, I wouldn't believe it. And anybody that does believe it is a damn fool because you've lied for 500 years. So that's why the Second Amendment existed. So that the slave patrols, so that the militias could exist during slavery. And then when slavery was eradicated in 1863, 64, and 65, so that the slave patrols could be armed. That's where the term states' rights came from, because of the push to arm these militias and have it be a state responsibility. That's why the original draft of the Second Amendment, drafted by James Madison before 1791, when it passed, had the word country in it, because obviously your goddamn toilet paper constitution was a national document. So have enough brains matter between your ears to ask the question, why would the Second Amendment say state if it's a national document? Because they wanted to ensure the southern states could be armed against African people. That's what it was about. I don't give a damn. I know every time I say that, I get all these goddamn mediocre ass crackers who want to make comment. I don't give a damn what you crackers say. You can't refute that truth. All you can do is get mad about it, and we don't give a goddamn about you being mad. Join the club. God damn it. Join the club of people who are mad. I'm mad that I got to entertain a bunch of imbeciles. I got to sit here and listen to a bunch of imbeciles every day of my life. I'm mad about that. And if you had any sense, you would be too. But the Second Amendment, like the First Amendment, is absolute complete bullshit. Nobody's trying to take you. There are 100 guns to every person in this society. And if you crackers think somebody's trying to take your guns and that they have a right to take yours, I invite you to try to take mine and see what happens. And you understand that we don't believe in that shit. We never would. How the hell are we gonna believe in not being armed when we gotta live in a country with you goddamn terrorists? Anybody that doesn't believe in that, it needs to go get their head examined. Living in this cesspool. Look at these crackers on the screen, just harassing us for existing. Slave patrols. That's all they've ever done. That's all they've ever done. They've never done anything else except that. And so let's talk about the Fourth and the 14th Amendment. All right. I said the 13th, but I didn't include the 13th. I'll talk about that in a quick second. Why? Because I just didn't think it was worth it. But the Fourth Amendment is interesting because it's supposed to protect you against illegitimate searches and seizures without so-called just cause. So, in other words, I live in California, and a lot of states in this backward country are the same as California in this regard. They are not states where you have to show identification upon request from the police. They are not. In California, just because a cop says, I need to see your license, you don't have to give it to them. Now, I'm not telling you not to do it. I mean, people are so dumbass. I'm not, you decide how you want to do it. I'm telling you, I don't just give them my stuff because I have dignity. I don't do that. So I just want to explain to you why I'm saying that. And then if you want to continue to be a coward, then you were going to be one anyway. But the reason why I don't do it is because what's supposed to be the case here, and I'm struggling with this government. You know, you say these are your goddamn laws. We already know they don't apply to us, but I'm gonna struggle with you over it. I'm not just gonna accept your repression. So what's required in these states, you have to check your state. I don't know where you live, but what's required in this state and many of the states, I think it's like half of them in this country are like this, is that if they're asking for your ID, they have to have a reasonable suspicion that a crime has been committed. So you should ask them when they ask you for your ID, what is the crime that you believe has been committed that you're investigating? If they can't tell you anything, then tell them, okay, so I'm free to go, right? I'm bouncing. I don't want to talk to you. I tell cops that all the time. I did it on Wednesday here. Cop was talking to me because we had a protest for the union, and I was at the door letting the people in, and he kept talking about these people are making noise. It's a protest. It's not a protest. And he said, well, they're disrupting. I said, no, you're disrupting because you're not paying people livable wages. That's what's disrupted. And he went to say something else. And I said, I don't want to talk to you. I don't talk to terrorists. And I can, several people around, they can verify that. Say, you think, well, he didn't say that. No, you wouldn't say that because you're a coward. I say it to those goddamn terrorists all the time. I don't talk to terrorists because I'm not afraid of them like you are. You're afraid of every goddamn thing. Afraid of your own shadow, afraid of your own reflection in the mirror. What good are you? God damn it. Grow some backbone. We need people with backbone in 2026 and beyond. So you don't have to give your ID just because they ask you for it. You don't have to let them search your car. You people believe in this damn Constitution and you don't even practice this stuff. You don't have to have them, again, if they ask you to search your car, they have to have a reasonable suspicion of a crime. If they just tell you, well, I just want to see what you have, you don't have to let them do it. They've asked to search my car many times. Can I search your car? I'm like, no, I want you in my car. I don't want anything to do with you. Are you sure about that? I'm sure about that. I don't know if I'm sure about too much in the universe, but one thing I'm 100% sure of is I do not want to deal with you in my life. I am 100% sure about that. Absolutely. So the 13th Amendment is supposed to outlaw slavery, right? That's what it's supposed to do. And it says outside of being punishment for a crime. So they wrote that because that's the prelude to mass incarceration, because their Constitution gives them the right to do that. But we all know that slavery exists on many levels, you know, and I'm not talking about, again, these damn crackers and graham crackers will say African peoples. Some cracker wrote me today, Africa, um, if Africa's so great, why don't you move there? And I'm like, go on my page. I gave him the link and donate. I'm moving to Africa. That's you late to the show. But I'm not just leaving and leaving you all the wealth that you people have stolen from us. We're going to take our wealth back. And once we do that, then a lot of us are going to want to go to Africa. Once we get control of Africa's wealth, all these Negroes running around here, I'm Native American, they're going to shed all that shit immediately. Watch. Mark my words. Shed all that shit in seconds. I'm an African. Yeah, I'm African. Yeah, I've always been African. You've been African for 13 seconds once you realize there was benefit to you in being African. So that's what's going to happen. And I told the cracker that. I said, you, and a lot of you people are going to want to go to Africa. I said, but we're not going to make the same mistake twice. We ain't letting you in this time. You ain't coming in. You come this time, you're going to get a totally different reception than you did a couple hundred years ago. I'm not saying white people can't come to Africa because we're not stupid. We know that a lot of white people are better friends to us than a lot of people that look like us because this is a class struggle that we're engaged in. We're not confused about this, but a lot of these white people here and a lot of the Negroes that do everything they can to lick the juice off of their genitals, they are here and they deserve to be there. They should stay here for 1,000,000 years. This is exactly where they belong. I had a Negro the other day. I want to go to Africa, and I'm like, I hope you don't go. He's like, well, can you give me some advice on how to get there? I'm like, nope, because I don't want people like you going to Africa. Stay your black ass here. This is where you belong. This is where your slave quarters is. Also, you want to do, you only demonstrated to me that you want to be a slave as long as I've known you. Why would I want you at home? We're trying to get that slave mentality out of our homeland. So stay your ass here, please, and serve your masters. And that's all you want to do. So that's the 13th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was supposedly to allow us through the I'm sorry, I get them confused because it's bullshit. One of the 13th, 14th, one of them was supposed to be eradicate slavery. Obviously, that hasn't happened, so that's bullshit. And then the other one was supposed to give us the right to vote, uh, give us opportunities to have that. And obviously that didn't happen. So freedom was supposed to give us freedom. So none of these things happened. Now, immediately in the late 1700s, you had the Freedmen's Bureau that I would argue was the most progressive period in this country's history. That's where they had initiatives to try to give enslaved Africans land. Never happened. Try to get us these opportunities to have political power. Never happened. And when symbols of these things happen, that's when you had the creation of the Ku Klux Klan. So there was never any really serious commitment to eradicating slavery and providing us the opportunity to catch up for those 350 years that we were property. That never happened. And so if you understand that never happened, it shouldn't, you know, these white people are really something. We were 350 years we worked for free to build up and enrich US capitalism. And so now we're supposed to be on the same political economic plane as everybody else. Like that doesn't even make any sense. But in spite of that, because of the spirit of our people, we are right there with the majority of white people. That's why white people are mad. That's the reason why they're upset. They've had a 500-year head start and they still haven't been able to get ahead of us. That's because you're too many of y'all are just mediocre. You just got to accept that. You're just mediocre human beings. And you don't have the spirit that we have. You don't have the determination that we have. That's why I have a shirt that says, stereotyped as lazy as soon as we stopped working for free. Stereotyped as lazy as soon as we stopped working for free. I'm sick of hearing that shit. We are the last people that are lazy. We gave this goddamn country 350 years of free labor. We are not lazy. We are not lazy. We just tired of being pimped. That's what that is. We're tired of being pimped, and we should be. So now I want to talk about the 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendment to close us out. And I just want to direct your picture your attention rather to Miss Fannie Lou Hamer in the picture, who's testifying for the world about the raw terror her and her family experienced in 1964 in Mississippi, Macomb County, Mississippi, just because she dared to try and register to vote. That's all she did. So you had your 14th Amendment, which allegedly gave men the right to vote in 1570, I think it was. And then you had the 15th and 19th Amendment, which essentially said the same thing, that no one can be discriminated against on the basis of race when it comes to voting. And so clearly you had that. And then you had the 1964 Voting Rights Act, which the work of people like Miss Hamer led to its passage. 1965, actually. I'm sorry, that's a typo. Voting Rights Act. But clearly now you have these people with this gerrymandering and redistricting to prevent African people from having the right to vote for who they want. This is 2026 and this is happening. So clearly, all these laws, this constitution, this is not worth the paper it's written on. It's toilet paper. It's not worth the paper it was written on because your constitution said that at least African men could vote. That didn't happen. When we tried to do that, we were killed and terrorized from voting. Then you had your 1965 Voting Rights Act that only passed because of the pressure the civil rights movement put on it. And that didn't work. We were still terrorized. And then now, the only reason why they don't terrorize us now is because times have just changed, right? They don't have the capacity to do that. Number one, a lot of white people wouldn't do it because they know how unjust the system is. And number two, a lot of us, a lot more of us, we always fought back, but a lot more of us would fight back now. Like you know, there's a thing called collective consciousness. Our people have collective consciousness. All people have collective consciousness. And what that means is that if you look at African youth, because no segment of the population in this backward cesspool is criticized more than our youth. More than our youth. Our youth are constantly criticized. And the people criticize them ain't worth a goddamn. I passed gas this morning. It's worth more than the people who are criticizing African youth. They are not doing a single thing to contribute to anything other than putting food in their fat ass bellies and then continuing to fart the food out and have nothing to contribute to the forward progress of humanity. But yet they want to criticize our young people all the time. And I'm talking about people that look like us, because a lot of us ain't worth a goddamn. That's just the honest to God truth. Especially people my age ain't worth shit. Not worth a damn thing. And that's just the honest to God reality. And those of you that know people, you know I'm telling the truth. Ain't worth a damn. Wouldn't sacrifice a pinky nail for our people when all of our people died to give you the right to have everything you have right now. That's an absolute fact. But what what we're saying is that that's what happened. All these efforts were made to bring about the vote, and none of these things were able to ensure that it would happen. And so here we are in 2026. We're still faced with this reality, and I would argue that we don't have any more power today from the voting process than we had in 1960 when we had zero elected officials. You can't demonstrate to me. You've had someone in the White House, you've had senators, you've had House of Representatives people, you've had people on the state and local level. We've had thousands of elected officials since 1960. And what today can we say we want to make that happen and we can make it happen? Not a damn thing. And I'm not saying people haven't tried. There are a number of them that have tried. But I'm just saying the power doesn't come from the voting process. The power comes from the movement that pushes the systems of power in the society. And I just don't understand why we can't understand that. I don't understand why we think that all I have to do is pull a lever and we'll get everything we need. And the only problem is that not enough of us are pulling the lever. They're just proving to you right now that that's not true because they'll just, if enough of us pull the lever, they'll just change the districts so that we're not voting for nobody. So clearly, that's alone is not the solution. The solution is we have to have a movement that is organized to push these people and hold them accountable to our interests. And I'm not going to be doing that. I'm fighting for revolution. But I'm saying those of you that say that's what the solution is, if you're serious about it, that's what you have to do. That's what you have to bring about. That's what you have to make happen, right? So it's important to talk about this because these 15th and 19th Amendments talked about discrimination on the basis of race in voting wouldn't be permitted. Like, when is that? There's been, uh, this man that's president in this country right now called the state election commissioner in, what was it, Georgia? Somewhere, yeah, Georgia, I think it was, in 2020, and basically threatened him to produce false evidence. I mean, they are still engaging in these same terrorist activities. They just can't do it the same way. But it's still the same thing. Whether it's Jim Crow or whether it's James Crow, Professor James Crow, it's still the same result at the end of the day. And we have got to understand that, because the minute that someone starts talking about this Constitution, and we could talk about the Constitution all day, we only have an hour. But my point is that all of these amendments that I've talked about, with the 5 or 6 we talked about today, they're all a bunch of BS as it relates to ensuring that marginalized people have rights. They're a bunch of BS. And they have to just keep adding on to it, because when they pass something, it doesn't work. Because these people in this country don't respect us as human beings. So they're not going to respect any law. You can't legislate behavior, it doesn't work. The only way that we can get respect is not through passing some law through the capitalist system. Where has that worked for us? What laws have been passed that are respected by this system as it relates to African people and indigenous people and all oppressed people? Name me one law where you could say, well, that law passed and they've honored that consistently in your favor. No, that's not true. And whatever there has been developed in this country, the system didn't produce it. We did, for the struggle for liberation. And whatever it was a compromise. Affirmative action was a compromise because we were burning this country to the ground in the 1960s. That's where affirmative action came back, and these crackers knew what they were doing. They get enough of us up there, and then in individual representation. And once these people began, the whole strategy they had behind affirmative action was to increase the African middle class, because they understood that once Africans began to make money and have class interests that aligned more with the European petty bourgeoisie, then we would become de facto defenders of the capitalist system. And clearly, if you look at all these idiots talking today, 50 Cent and Ice Cube and Ice Ass and Dumbass and all these people talking today, that's what they're doing, because they got money and they're trying to protect their money. We didn't have that in the 1950s and 60s. So that's class struggle, you all. You got to, I'm rooting for everybody black. You sound like a fucking idiot saying that. How can we root for everybody? Everybody black ain't rooting for us. You got to be out your damn mind. We're not doing that. Some of these Negroes need to be put to rest. That's just all there is to it. We're at war. Damn it, we're at war. And some of these people need to be put out the way. So we are saying, in case there's any confusion, that the Constitution of the U.S. is toilet paper. It's worthless. Stop talking to us about it. And those of you that want to try to argue in defense of it, then do something. Make it come into existence. Otherwise, don't talk. We don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear about it. It's a waste of our time, and it's an insult to our dignity. 250 years of lies, murder, repression. Take your country and go straight to hell. And stop telling us that we have to leave. We're not listening. We don't give a damn what you think and what you say. Don't send that message, because we're staying here to steal back what you stole from us. To take back, not steal. We can't steal it. You stole it from us. To take back. One cracker wrote to me today, well, if you don't control the resources anymore, then they're not yours. And I said, you know damn well, if I busted you over your worthless ass head, you wouldn't be saying, well, you busted my head, so you can take whatever you want. You'd be calling the police, because that's all you people know how to do. So stop lying. You don't believe that. You just saying that. You only believe that when it benefits you. As soon as, these people are famous for that. If it benefits them, they believe it. If it don't benefit them, then, it's a total opposite thing. Just total hypocrisy. and contradiction. We're not doing that. We know the difference between truth and lies. So stand for truth. And we want to thank you for joining us. We do invite you come back next week. We're going to have a program entitled The Unknown Relationship Between Malcolm X and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. So you don't want to miss that. So join us for that. The QR code in the upper left, red and white one, you have a lot of different programs. You can get information if you scan that QR code. The Forward Ever shop where you can support clothing for the African Revolution. Please do that and support Hood Communists, the blog. You should write for Hood Communists. You don't like what we're talking about or what we're writing about, write something. We encourage you to do that. On Thursdays here in Sacramento, Northern California, we have community self-defense. Come on out. We're really ratcheting up the training. But no matter whether you have what level of training you have, if you have no training, most of the people don't have any, come on through. We can get you sparring in a very short period of time if you put the work in. So come on through Thursdays, 6 to 8 p.m., 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese, Cottage Way, Unit 15, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15, Thursday, 6 to 8 here in Sacramento. Come on through. We'd love to see you. It's a wonderful experience. And then Saturday in Oakland, we have Meet the AAPRP. This is our follow-up event to African Liberation Day, which took place on May 23rd in Oakland. So we want to invite you in Northern California to come out Saturday, July 11th from 3 to 5 p.m. It's at the Oak Stop Center, 1721 Broadway. That's in downtown Oakland, 1721 Broadway, 3 to 5 p.m. It's going to be a very good event. So come on out and check us out. Learn more about what we can do to fight back. That's what we're going to be talking about. So come on out and join us for that. If you're anywhere in Northern California, join the APRP. And if you're not in Northern California for those two events, let people know who are. Come out. Make a plan to come out and let people know. AAPRP-intl.org. Join the APRP. We need people desperately. We need to build a mass party. We need you. Please come through. Dedicate your time. Build the party. And the bottom right, the black and white QR code, Burkina Books, is a program. You become a monthly sponsor. It helps us buy revolutionary literature for our people at home so we can build revolutionary work study groups. So support that. Scan the QR code so you can do that. And the upper right, I have my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. The QR code is right next to it. Scan that. It's only $8. Paperback, $5 digital. It's a very good organizing book. So you get that knowledge and understanding, but also 100% of the proceeds from the book go towards the anti-fascist work that we do. What anti-fascist work, you say? The work to here in Sacramento, we're going to be doing a lot of work to protect marginalized communities. So 100% of the proceeds I get from this book, I can buy supplies. I do that for the self-defense class. So help us out. Call your library. Tell them to order the book. Take you 5 minutes. Call your bookstore in your town, wherever you are. Ask them to order the book. They can order it through the QR code, and it's only $8, so they can sell it for a few dollars more than that and make a good return. And it gets the book out there. It helps us develop the organizing culture that we need in this society, and then it also provides us resources to keep people safe. I don't know anything else I can tell you if you're a peace and justice loving person that should be able to do any better than helping you see the importance of supporting this. So we thank you for joining us. We ask you to be safe and enjoy the rest of your day. Forward ever!